The Castles of Tuscany, and if you turn your head to the side, you can read it. The Castles of Tuscany, a game published by Alia, designed by Stefan Feld, a game in which we collect cards, we collect tiles, and then we place tiles, and we do all of those things to be able to collect points and bonuses. And this is important because in different phases of the game, you will want to do more engine building, other points, more point buildings, and so on and so forth. But before we go too far, so in the game we will be creating a personal region, we'll be placing tile on that region, and the patterns that we form there will score points for us. This wheel here is where we keep track of victory points, and there is a very important twist here. As you can see, there are two different point tracks. One is the green and one is the red. The green is where you will score more of your points as the game progresses. I just did a lot of effects to score me 15 points. Hooray! Then at the end of a round, we take the number of points and we transfer it to the red wheel. So, I scored 15 points on the red wheel also. What's important is this is not reset. Say at the end of round 2, I score, I now have a total of 30 points. Now I transfer 30 points here. So I had 15. I go to whatever that would be. That would be 50, wouldn't it? I don't know. I'm not a great mathematician. 30 plus 15, no, I think that's 45. So as you can see, it's very important because points that you score early on will be then scored again at the end of round 2 and round 3. The game lasts 3 rounds. At the end of the 3rd round, the player with the most points on the red wheel wins the game. And there are a couple of other things that will score you points in a final mini scoring, but that's the general idea. Get a lot of points early on, and so those will multiply. And again, that's where you have the balance between I want to build a nice engine early on, spend the early round building a total awesome engine, but by then I may be left out of a chance of really scoring enough points to catch up. Each player receives 3 region tiles at the beginning of the game randomly, and then you can place them in front of you to form your region. Each player also has a starting castle that goes in one of the dark green spaces you see there. Each player has a personal board that really, mainly what it does is a player aid of the different advantages that you receive when you place a tile on your board, plus an area where you can place bonus tiles. So if I get, say, a tile that lets me draw more cards, then I place it there, and that's a reminder that now I draw 3 cards. The really interactive, the most interactive element though is this one here. Here also we have a little player aid that reminds of how many points we score when we complete an area in our region. For example, if I place an orange tile there, I completed a 1 hex area, and that scores me 1 point. If I place 3 yellow tiles there, I completed a 3 hex area, and that scores me 6 points. But again, back to these 3 stacks of hexes, of hexagonal tiles, very important. We shuffle these tiles and we place them there in 3 stacks of 7 tiles each at the beginning of the game. During the game, you will acquire these tiles, and every time you acquire a tile from a central offer of 8 that are drawn from that pile there, every time I acquire a tile, I take 1 from my leftmost stack and I place it there to replace that. That means that after a while, my leftmost stack will be empty, and when that happens, so when the first player to empty the leftmost stack triggers the end of the first round, and that's when we transfer points from one wheel to the other. Then we keep playing. Other people that still have tiles there do not clean that stack. They play from there. And so we continue until somebody has emptied their second stack. That triggers the end of the second round. And then, of course, that's how also we triggered the end of the 3rd round. There is a little final scoring at the end. But then that's it. Then the player with the most points on the red wheel wins the game. Another couple of things, we have these cards here represent different types of regions. We have wooden components representing resources such as marble or workers. And then we have these bonus tiles here, which again we place next to our personal board, and that will give us more good stuff when we trigger an action. Suppose that's what my board looks like after I acquire some bonus tiles. Now, players will alternate taking turns, and when it is your turn, you take exactly one of 3 actions. An action is draw cards from this deck of region cards. You draw them and you add them to your personal hand. It will be, if you follow the rule book that comes with the game, the standard action of drawing cards lets you draw 2 cards, as indicated also there. If you have bonus tiles that you acquired, then you draw more, so in that case it would be 3. But there is a new version of the rule book that has been released, and you can find it online, that says that the basic action allows you to draw 3 cards, which is a huge difference. That's a major change. And that, of course, makes you suspect that the game, as published, came out a little bit undercooked, because you would expect that designer, publisher, developers, they would have made up their mind about an action that, as you will see, is so absolutely crucial to the success of the game. So, draw 2 cards for your basic action of drawing, plus bonuses if you're playing with the rulebook as printed. Draw 3 if you're playing with the updated rulebook that you can find online. But the action is still, you draw some cards and you add them to your hand. And they simply represent different types of terrain, different of areas matching hexes in your region. Another action that you can do if you're not drawing cards is to take tiles from the central offer. You select any tile and you place it in one of your storage spaces. And you start with 1. Again, you may acquire more every time you acquire a new storage space. As the number 2 indicates there, you also get 2 points on the green track. When I take a tile from there, as we said, I replace it with 1 from there. And so right now, for example, I would be allowed to store 2 tiles from the general supply in my personal area. The other action that we can take, which really is what this is all about, what we have been preparing for, is to finally place tiles from our personal supply into our region, to move them from storage to the region. To do so, we need to play cards. The general idea is that to place a tile of a certain kind, you need to discard 2 cards of that color. So, for example, to place this yellow tile, I discard these 2 cards and I'm good to go. I can place that tile. I can also replace one of these cards with 2 cards of another color. That is a pair of cards of another color. Say 2 of another color replace a yellow, which also means that 2 pairs of cards allow you to replace anything else. Of course, it's a lot more expensive than, because you're spending 3 or 4 instead of 2. So ideally, you want to discard the correct ones. And when you place a tile in your personal area, it has to touch a tile that is already there. You're developing, you're expanding from your starting town, so that your first placement or placements need to be adjacent to that one. And from there, you can develop and go into different areas. When we place tiles is when you also get a chance of scoring points and of getting other kinds of bonuses. For example, I check if by placing a tile, I completely filled up a region, in which case, remember, it's a region, an area in a region, an area of a color, in which case I score points as indicated in that area that I showed you earlier. For example, by completing that one, I immediately score 6 points, and that is good. If I also actually cover all hexes of a color in my region, for example, if all yellow hexes have been covered, I also gain a bonus, and these tiles here are a reminder of that. For example, the first player to cover all yellow hexes in their area will score 3 points on the green wheel, and after that you flip it because the second player would only score 1, and after that no one scores anything. And different kinds of terrain will give you different kinds of amounts of points if you are the first or second player to cover all of those hexes in your personal area. So first we see if we can score points, and then we get bonuses as indicated here on our personal board. Say, for example, if I placed a city, then I can collect a bonus. If I get a agricultural area, I can score extra points. Marble, when I place a granite cave there, I get a marble token. If I have a bonus there, I'll collect more marble when I place a tile of that kind. And I can use these to copy actions that I already took. Basically means extra turns because each turn is an action. Say I drew cards, I spend a marble, and I drew more cards, and I draw more cards. I place a tile, I spend a marble, I place more tiles as long as I can pay for the cost. Workers, I collect workers by placing this type of terrain here, and then I can spend workers to replace cards when I'm spending cards to move tiles from storage to my personal region. And then this in here gives me the yield cards, which simply will give you different kinds of benefits, such as points on one track, points on another track, on the red track, and so on and so forth. So this is really the general idea. You will collect cards and tiles to then be able to place the tiles in your region to score points and collect more bonuses that go into your engine that will allow you then to collect more cards and more tiles and place more tiles more efficiently. Play for 3 rounds. Remember what triggers the end of each round. Score points, and at the end, the player with the highest score wins the game. The game looks very pretty production-wise, with the nice wheel that is in the middle, with the cars that have nice art, the wooden bits, all nice. And yet, for all that, the game just came out undercooked. The fact that the rulebook is just not clear, it leaves a lot to be desired. There's even a disclaimer now on the page on Board Game Geek. And some of those things really I was able to clarify only by looking at the rulebook, the versions of the rulebook in other languages that I happen to know, and then some things made a little more sense. Still, the fact that there is another version of the rulebook in which a key element, such as how many cards you draw with your basic action, the fact that it has been changed, that shows that there has been some weakness at the time of development. This being said, when you get past these things here and you decide if you want to play with 2 or 3 cards, and frankly I think 3 is better. One of my nitpicks is that when you take a turn just to draw 2 cards and they may not be the ones that you need, that's a little bit underwhelming. But once you get past that element, the game is a simple, nice game that you can play in less than an hour. You can definitely play with fairly young gamers, with casual gamers, and they may be at the beginning still feel a little bit disoriented because of all of the special effects. But again, if you're teaching those effects, you're probably going to do a better job than the rulebook does, so that's going to help already. But other than that, it's a game that is just simple and nice because you collect the stuff that you need to place tiles on your board, and you place those tiles, and then you collect more stuff and repeat. But without a feeling of rinsing and repeating, without a feeling of the game becoming redundant, because as you go along with the game, then you're also building an engine, so later turns can be more fun because you pull off some synergies. In particular, if you say you place an orange tile that will give you those workers, and you have maybe the ability of getting 2. Each worker replaces a card, so you can place an orange tile that gives you 2 of those guys, which you then spend to place an orange tile, and basically you can place several of those without having to draw cards, things like that. That kind of synergies can be really fun. But here's where the game, at the beginning, I was super suspicious. The problem that I foresaw was runaway leader. Because the fact that between rounds, the points that you got early on keep giving, then do make it objectively hard to catch up later on. So you have to be careful. I would even say you have to warn your players of that element, which is if you just spend your first round building a nice engine, by the time it pays off, it may not be able to pay off enough to catch up with people that have been snowballing their early measly points. So once people are warned of that, then the game changes, and I think it plays the way it was meant to be played, which is with that balance between I both need to collect some points early on, put them in the bank, and then see them become bigger and bigger as the game goes, but also build some objectively cool engine for the third round. And the third round is when you start having the race to complete that the last tile that allows me to score for covering all the tiles in an area, that I'm trying to pull off some other mighty synergies. I'm maybe picking up a tile because I see that would allow you to complete all of the tiles of a certain kind in your region and score those points, etc., etc., etc. So you do have that nice element between I need to constantly score points, but I should also put together an engine. So the game feels a lot more tactical than strategic because of that. Also, you may have your grand strategy based on I need that red tile, which doesn't show up in the offer in the middle of the table. It shows up, somebody gets it before you get to it. So you have to also, again, it's good to have a strategy, a long-term strategy in the back of your mind that you're trying to pull off, but the game is very tactical, which is not a bad thing. It's not a negative per se. I just want to point that out because that will appeal to some players rather than others. And again, there is a bit of a random element there when it comes to the cards that you get, but if you draw 3 as your standard thing instead of 2, that's mitigated. And when it comes to the offer of tasks that are out there. Plus, there is some limited interaction, again, because I can see your board and I see what tiles you need desperately, what tiles will allow you to complete a certain area, reach a certain area, and maybe I can do something about that. I can collect more tiles, especially if my bonus early on was to get some extra storage space. Then I can just hoard some tiles there to deprive you of those. I can also, through that, manipulate the scoring phase because I see that in 2 turns you'll be able to score something big. So I'm gonna start just grabbing tiles from the center of the table to score before it gets to that point. So there are a lot of interesting elements here. There is interaction, which is indirect, sometimes a little more direct, never like attacking directly, but if I'm trying to end the round early because I don't want it to score, it's pretty obvious what I'm doing, and there can be a little bit of that confrontational element there, but it's not too bad. So there are just many elements that play into this game, but ultimately the game again remains simple, and most importantly, it is enjoyable. Once you deal with these caveats that you need to make sure the players don't allow a leader to run away early on, that everybody scores some points early on, because otherwise then you're going to complain about the game. But the game does that, but doesn't encourage you to build a long-term engine, neglecting early scoring. So overall, it's a game that I enjoyed. It's more than a filler, definitely. It has some meat in it. It has a lot of interesting details and elements that play into it. If you can deal with a little bit of randomness, with a little bit of interaction that can be confrontational, and in particular, if you're willing to put in the work to learn, to go through a fairly complicated rule book for a fairly simple game, then I think Castles of Tuscany can definitely be an enjoyable game.